Alright guys, so today is May 8th, which means it's the day that Antony Blinken, Joe Biden's Secretary of State, was supposed to deliver a report to Congress determining whether or not the United States believes that Israel is or is not compliant with international law. And then last night, we get this update, here from The Independent. Report into whether Israel broke international law in Gaza indefinitely delayed by the Biden administration. Indefinitely delayed. This is what we get the day before this report was supposed to come out. I mean, first off, the idea that this is even still in question as to whether or not Israel has been compliant with international law is a fucking joke. I mean, go look at all of these different UN reports, all of these different reports from well-respected, international human rights organizations. How about even just specific instances of egregious war crimes, right? The World Central Kitchen strike that we covered on this channel, the Jose Andres connected, food aid workers who were struck not once, not twice, but 3 separate times in what was supposed to be a deconfliction zone, and after they had already been coordinating with the IDF. Is that not a war crime? How about the Flower Massacre, where dozens and dozens of people who were starving and trying to desperately go and reach aid were massacred by Israel? Over 700 were injured in that one Flower Massacre, and that wasn't even the only Flower Massacre, right? How about the mass graves with hundreds of bodies, some of them women, some of them children, some of them found with hand ties behind their back and stripped naked? How about that? Are none of these war crimes? None of these are even potentially violations of international law? Or the blocking of aid from getting into Gaza that has now resulted, according to the World Food Program director Cindy McCain, as I covered yesterday on the channel, it's now exploded into a full-blown famine in the north that is rapidly spreading south, a direct result of Israel withholding aid from Gaza. There are thousands of trucks that are stacked up on the border of Gaza that they are not allowing in, and they've been doing this for months. So the idea that it's even up in the air, that it's even in question as to whether or not Israel is violating international law is a joke to anybody who's been paying even just a little bit of attention to what's been going on over the last 7 months. Now, the other thing is that this report, the reason they delayed it is because it can really only go one of 2 ways, okay? Option number 1 is they're going to come out in this report and they're going to say Israel is compliant with international law. And if that's the case, then you've just completely obliterated even small remaining crumbs of credibility that you may still have had. Okay, completely obliterating that if they come out and say Israel is compliant with international law. Option number 2 is that they have to admit, yes, Israel has been violating international law, and therefore the weapons, the billions of dollars in arms that we are giving them to commit this genocide in Gaza are totally illegal under the Leahy law. It's against U.S. law to sell weapons, to give arms and funding to a country that is blocking humanitarian aid, or a country that is engaging in, egregious, gross violations of human rights. Israel is doing both of those things. So those are the only 2 outcomes that could come from this report. And so I guess the Biden administration took option, C or option 3 and basically just said, we're just not going to come out with the report at all. We're just going to delay it even further. And this came after, they did that whole back and forth bullshit letter where Joe Biden was like, we need assurances from the government of Israel that you guys are not doing war crimes. And Israel returned with a letter and said, yeah, I know, I pinky promise, we're not committing war crimes. War crime? What is a war crime? I've never heard of that word in my life. And so they had this back and forth with the letter, which obviously is not credible in any way, shape, or form. And the U.S. government basically just operated on the principle that, yeah, we're going to accept that at face value. We are going to trust Israel at their word, even though the overwhelming body of evidence suggests otherwise. Now, we do have some pushback to all of this. Here we have Senator Van Hollen, who's actually been really good on the Israel stuff recently. Here's what he had to say about this report. He said, I've had a lot of conversations with folks in the administration really urging them to make sure that the report is credible, that it's seen to be based on facts and law and not based on what they wish it would be, or that it not be driven by policy outcomes that they might not want to take. In other words, cutting off weapons to Israel. What I've said to them is, God help us if this report somehow says that the delivery of humanitarian assistance has been compliant with international standards. God help us, because anybody with eyes to see and ears to hear knows that that's just not true. And he's 100% correct here. right? I mean, seriously, what does it say about this country if our official government agencies, right, our military can come out and just completely lie about this kind of shit? Now, I mean, obviously, if you watch my channel, yeah, we lie all the time. We commit war crimes and nobody gets held accountable, of course, right? But it is like taking it up to an entirely different level when now we're not just lying on behalf of our own military, we're also lying on behalf of a foreign government's military that has been committing widespread human rights abuses for the last 7 months in front of the entire world. You know, like, this has not been something that's been hidden, okay? We all have seen, you know, even just the IDF soldiers posting their own war crimes on TikTok and laughing and bragging about it, right? So, I mean, he's 100% right. Anybody with eyes and ears knows exactly what's been going on, right? So we'll have to see what comes from that, you know, pending report, indefinitely delayed and suspended report. But we also have, I mean, additional reminders on top of, you know, that specific report, just what has been happening with the State Department over the last couple of months. This is from just a couple weeks ago, back in late April. Some U.S. officials say in an internal memo that Israel may be violating international law in Gaza. I mean, I love the may be. Like, you're telling me the State Department, the U.S. government that has more resources than any, you know, agency on the face of the planet, they can't figure out whether or not they violated international law, but like me, some like random dumbass, you know, independent 24-year-old YouTuber, I can find evidence that they violated international law, but the State Department, the U.S. government, they can't. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? We've also had this. I mean, U.S. accused of failing to act on reports of abuses by Israeli forces. So this was more specifically talking about, you know, human rights abuses that were committed specifically in the West Bank before October 7th that the U.S. also has refused to act on. So again, it's not as if they don't know about human rights violations. It's not as if they don't know about the war crimes. They're just ignoring it. Okay, they've had these internal memos. They've had, you know, blowback in the form of many State Department officials resigning in protest. They know exactly what's going on. They're just lying about it. I mean, this was all the way back from October. Former State Department official explains why he resigned over U.S. arms sent to Israel, and he details, you know, exactly what we've been covering over the last 6 months. The U.S. has given Israel a complete blank check to basically do whatever they want with no real red lines at all. We've given them countless billions of dollars in weapons to engage in those war crimes, and nothing is ever done about it. And so, you know, you have some members of the State Department who are like, I can't be complicit in this anymore, right? Now, we also have reporting like this. Why hasn't the U.S. called for an investigation into mass graves in Gaza? And I remember showing you guys, I forget who was answering the question. Maybe it was Matthew Miller, John Kirby, or Patel, or one of the other guys. But they were asked about this, and they straight up said, we are against having an international independent investigation into these mass graves where hundreds of bodies were just uncovered outside of hospitals, right? What does it say about your position if you're not willing to even endorse having an independent investigation into that? I mean, I think it says a lot, right? You shouldn't have anything to be fearful of if Israel is not committing massive war crimes and human rights abuses. Now, we also had this clip, which is kind of unrelated to the State Department reports, but also obviously related in some ways. This was Mark Milley. Okay, this is like one of the, you know, former top generals here in the United States. And he had an interesting take here at one of these panel discussions that he was giving. Let's just go ahead and listen to a little bit of this.
Before we all get self-righteous about what Israel's doing, and I feel horrible for the innocent people in Gaza that are dying, but we shouldn't forget that we, the United States, killed a lot of innocent people in Mosul and Raqqa. That we, the United States, killed 12,000 innocent French civilians. And here we are on the 80th anniversary of Normandy, on the prep fires for Normandy. We destroyed 69 Japanese cities, not including Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We slaughtered people in massive numbers, innocent people who had nothing to do with their government, men, women, and children. War is a terrible thing, but if it's going to have meaning, if it's going to have any sense of morality, it has to be a political purpose, and it must be achieved rapidly with the least cost, and that you do by speed.
And what are the...
Okay, I mean, I don't think I've ever heard, you know, I think it was a 4-star or a 5-star general. I don't think I've ever heard this high ranking of a U.S. military official just come out and say it like that. I mean, yeah, we've committed massive war crimes throughout U.S. history. You don't have to go all the way back to World War II. You know, you can look at, every well, really every single war since World War II we have committed, war crimes in. But I mean, he's 100% right. Whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan or back in Vietnam or whatever the case may be, yeah, we slaughtered a bunch of innocent civilians. I mean, how many countless hundreds of thousands or millions over the years have died as a result of our military actions? And I guess his point is that because we've committed egregious war crimes and violations of international law, that therefore we shouldn't judge Israel? Not exactly sure what kind of a point you're making there. Right, my interpretation of the history of U.S. war crimes would be maybe we should have accountability, right? Maybe we should have accountability for our own military and also for the Israeli military. It seems like he's saying the opposite of that. Because we commit war crimes, everybody else gets a free pass to commit war crimes. What kind of an argument is that? I mean, it's just bizarre, right? Now, we also have this that came out a couple days ago, and I didn't get to cover it. So basically, you had 12 Republican senators, okay, who wrote a letter to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and this is coming after reports have been leaking over the last couple of weeks that the ICC is going to, potentially issue warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and other high-ranking Israeli government, military officials, etc. And so Israel has been panicking over this. They're telling the United States, you guys got to go and help us. You got to save us. And as a result of that, here we had 12 Republican senators just straight up threatening the ICC chief prosecutor with, quote, severe consequences for him, his family, and staff if he goes ahead with an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. And they very ominously ended this letter saying, you have been warned. Guys, this is an official, signed, documented letter that came from 12 of the, 100 most powerful people in our Congress. And they sent this to the International Criminal Court, just straight up threatening them. We will come after you, okay? We will ruin your life. We will try to ruin your family's lives, your staff members' lives, if you dare to issue warrants against genocidal maniacs in Israel. This is where we're at. This is the length that our government will go to protect Israel from any sort of accountability, right? I mean, Jesus Christ. Now, the ICC responded to this, and they're basically like, do you guys not understand that issuing these kinds of threats and trying to impede the ICC is in and of itself a violation that we could potentially come after you for? Now, again, the United States, I've said this before, the United States and Israel, neither of these countries are signatories to the ICC. Palestine is a signatory to the ICC, which is what helps give them jurisdiction to issue these kinds of warrants, right? But, another important thing to remind you guys is that back in, I think it was 2003, I believe, in the George W. Bush administration, the U.S. government essentially passed a law that was later dubbed the Hague Invasion Act, where we straight up said, if you ever try to bring a U.S. soldier or military official or politician to The Hague, we reserve the right to literally invade The Hague to free that person. So, I mean, again, these are the lengths that we will go to in order to avoid any sort of accountability, right? Now, I'll finish off with this. Because we do have the U.S. coming out and now saying that they are withholding some specific weapon shipments that were intended to go to Israel. They're saying that this is done out of fears that it could be used in Rafah, which is a little bit of a weird, justification, because Israel has been saying they're going to go into Rafah for months and months and months. I don't think there was ever a point that Israel said they weren't going to go into Rafah. So if you were concerned about that, it seems like you should have cut off the weapons a long time ago. And also, I mean, even just setting Rafah as your red line for cutting off some weapon shipments, but not any of the shit that Israel has been doing over the last 6 or 7 months. None of that crossed a line, but now this crosses a line. 15,000 dead kids, complete obliteration of the healthcare system, the education system, destroying farmland and residential buildings and mosques and churches and schools and UN shelters and refugee camps. None of that was a bridge too far. Now it's a bridge too far because they're invading Rafah. I mean, don't get me wrong. We should be cutting off all of the weapons, not just some specific ones. But I mean, let's be real, right? And so we'll have to see where this goes. This could just be sort of like, a little, balloon that we're putting out there to try to give us sort of a warning shot. hey, be careful in Rafah, don't take it too far, or maybe there will be some sort of policy change. Again, guys, we're 7 months deep into a genocide. And now we're having conversations about maybe we won't send you as many 2,000-pound bombs to drop on refugee camps. I mean, it's just pathetic. Now, in response to Joe Biden, withholding some of these weapon shipments, we have here an Israeli member of the Knesset and Likud, that's Netanyahu's coalition, official, Tali Gottlieb, I guess is how you say her name, and she has a message for the U.S. This is what she said. I'll put her picture up here, but this is in Hebrew, so I won't play it. But she said, the U.S. is threatening not to give us precise missiles. Oh yeah? Well, I got news for the U.S. We have imprecise missiles. I'll use it. I'll just collapse 10 in Gaza, 10 buildings. That's what I'll do. So, bold strategy in response to some weapon shipments potentially being cut off due to your brazen war crimes and violations of international law. You are now threatening, in response to that, to commit war crimes and violations of international law by indiscriminately bombing buildings. That's what's happening here. Again, very bold strategy that they're going with here. Now, we also had a different reaction here from the IDF spokesman, Daniel Hagari, who basically came out and was trying to downplay the halting of some weapons. And in some ways, he's kind of right. He basically says, we've been solving a lot of our disagreements behind closed doors. What Joe Biden in the U.S. has given us over the last 6 or 7 months is, a scope without precedent in Israel's history. And that he's not really worried about this, that it's not necessarily going to affect their operational, capabilities inside of Rafah or inside of Gaza broadly. And so he's kind of correct about that. I mean, how many billions of dollars have we designated to go to Israel just in weaponry over the last 6-7 months, right? I mean, 2/3 of the people they've been killing in Gaza have been women and children, right? An overwhelming majority have been innocent civilians. And we have been arming them to the T. I mean, the idea that now, 7 months into this, we're going to maybe consider cutting off some of the 2,000-pound bombs that we've been sending to Israel is ridiculous. And at the same time, delaying a report that would, if it's credible in any way, shape, or form, conclude that Israel has been violating international law and therefore that weapon shipments are illegal, and we get a indefinitely delayed report from Biden. So, I mean, there you go. Just a little update. I'm going to have more stuff coming out later today, as well as tomorrow and over the weekend, obviously. So, I appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me over the last couple of months. The channel has actually been growing for the first time in a long time, which is nice to see. So, welcome to all of the new subscribers to the channel. Hit the like, subscribe, comment, all of that good shit so we can continue to grow. And, hopefully try to inflict a little bit of damage on the propaganda coming out of the mainstream.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying